Folks, thanks a lot for the 80,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome. But we're not stopping here. Let's push it, folks, to 100,000 subscribers. So give that support to the channel and subscribe and hit that like button down below to reach our goal of 153 likes. And now let's go for it. It all begins with a group of explorers stumbling upon an Ice Age glacier containing a girl within it, an ancient goddess who had fallen asleep for thousands of years. The men are baffled, and one of them instructs someone to get in touch with the Arcane Court when the goddess asks them to bring the best player of that era to her. In this world, the gods live bored and grant arises to humans superhuman or magical powers that make them apostles and give them the ability to challenge the gods in games. Currently, for the first time, 3 games against gods are happening simultaneously, marking a historic moment where people from all over the world stop to watch. A boy named Faye walks through the streets when he passes by a screen broadcasting the 3 games. Each of them has several players who were striving their hardest to win the challenges. However, despite all the effort, all the more than 100 apostles lose or give up on victory, concluding the 3 games without any wins for humans. Faye finishes watching the broadcast and decides to follow the path, as he is also one of the challengers, who is actually well known, as several people on the street identify the apostle. The guy goes to a place called the Ruin Branch Office of the Arcane Court, where other challengers recognize him as soon as he arrives. Faye is greeted by the manager Miranda, a person he hadn't seen in 6 months. The two enter the elevator, and the manager explains to Faye that a year ago, an ancient goddess was removed from permanently frozen ground, and she asked for the best player of that era, which is undoubtedly him. Faye remembers the incident as well as the fact that the goddess was taken to the Arcane Court, as it's a nearby location where she was found. Then Miranda explains that she is a peculiar goddess because in the past, she hid during a game of tag with humans, but fell asleep while hiding and took a freezing nap for 3,000 years, and apparently she is the avatar of fire in the form of a dragon. The manager also explains that the girl is a former goddess whose powers have been weakened, although she is still quite powerful, and therefore she should not be provoked because she could easily turn the city to ashes. Faye asks why they are dealing with such a dangerous goddess, and Miranda says that initially, no one knew her capability, but now they want him to keep an eye on the girl. The guy panics upon learning that he had gone there to be a watchdog for a goddess. Miranda explains that humans still don't know the reason for the descent of the higher spiritual beings, the gods, to Earth, and therefore they want to find out why the goddess is still there, and he is the only one capable of performing this task. Faye understands that he is the most qualified because the power of the gods is too great, and they can easily destroy humans. But as he has the Arise, which does not die, he is ideal for dealing with the girl, and Miranda reveals that it was the goddess herself who chose him. Next, the two enter the room where the goddess was waiting, and Faye notices the thousands of games that were everywhere, noticing that she clearly loves games. Then he picks up 2 dice and rolls them to get the numbers he wants. Miranda is puzzled by how he managed to do that, and Faye explains that all he needs to do is leave the opposite sides of the numbers he wants facing up and roll the dice with the perfect force to make them turn around. At that moment, the goddess appears, and Faye immediately notices the resemblance she has to a woman he knew as a child. Miranda introduces him as the best player, who managed to win 3 games against gods in the 3 years he became an apostle, and says he was appointed as a supervisor. Miranda introduces the goddess named Leolshie and asks the guy to introduce himself to her. However, Faye remains paralyzed, observing her resemblance to the person he knew in his past. The 2 girls don't understand what happened to Faye, and Miranda decides to return to her work and leave them alone to get to know each other better. But before leaving, she reminds Faye that he must do his best as a supervisor. As soon as Miranda leaves the room, Leolshie flies closer to Faye and tells them to entertain themselves in a game. The guy tries to say they could just talk, but the goddess says they will introduce themselves in a game. And so Leolshie starts arranging some cards on the table, while Faye wonders if that will be one of the games against gods, since they were not in the elements, where the challenges happen. Then he notices that the cards have words written on them like names, age, hometown, dreams, and hobbies. The goddess explains that she made that game when she was bored, and that it's called the Presentation Memory Game, which has the same rules as a memory game with a deck of cards, but instead of matching identical numbers, you must match a pair of self-presentation topics, and when that happens, the other must introduce themselves according to the card. In other words, if she draws a pair of hometown cards, for example, he must talk about where he came from. After explaining the rules, Leolshie starts shuffling the cards while asking Faye to respond honestly to whatever pairs come up. The guy agrees but asks her to shuffle the cards again because he memorized their positions when the goddess placed them on the table to explain the rules, and he followed them with his eyes as they were being shuffled, an old habit from when he trained with someone in his past. Leolshie is impressed by Faye's skill and admires his desire to play fairly and not cheat to win. Then the goddess finds it a waste for them to play on a table and uses a power to make all the cards float and spin in the air. Faye observes that he never forgets a card, and surely his opponent is also like that, and that way it would make things harder because they would continuously change places. The goddess decides to add one more rule, to limit the participants to a single turn, unlike a regular memory game where whoever finds a pair can repeat the turn. And Faye observes that this makes that game much more than just memorization, which gets them both excited to play. Meanwhile, Miranda watches them through a hidden camera. Faye is the first one to play and draws the cards of Hometown and Blood type. Due to the theme, he asks if gods have blood. The girl explains that yes, and it's hotter than lava, with a single drop capable of melting that building, but if he wants to know more, he'll need the Blood type pair. Next, Leolishi picks a name card and another from Hometown. Then, with the first pair of cards revealed, the goddess asks if Faye knows their position, and he effortlessly retrieves them. Leolishi then reveals that her hometown, like that of most gods, is in Elements, the place humans call the higher spiritual realm, and need to use a special door to enter. As they play, Miranda recalls that all games against gods take place in Elements, and as a prize for winning, apostles can use part of their Arise in the real world. The more victories they achieve, the more they can use these powers necessary to discover unexplored lands. In this world, 93% of the planet remains unexplored and harbors large creatures everywhere. Additionally, apostles lose the right to play after 3 defeats and complete the game with 10 victories, which include the celebration as a prize. This is something humanity doesn't understand the meaning of, as no one has ever achieved so many victories. But Miranda thinks perhaps Faye might be able to accomplish this goal. Back to the memory game, Faye comments on Leolishi's swift response regarding her hometown, and the goddess reminds him that it's the rule of the game, and that rules aren't mere restrictions, but a form of entertainment. Later, she gets the pair of name cards. Faye realizes he hasn't introduced himself yet and explains that his name is Faye Theophilus. The goddess then asks if he has a nickname. Faye denies it, but this makes him realize that the game requires not only memorization, but also thinking about what questions to ask with the pairs of cards he acquired to cover as many questions as he wants. Furthermore, since the goal is to get to know the opponent, even if he knows the position of a pair of cards, not picking up some may be the key to victory. He must choose the theme of the cards he picks carefully to gather as much information as possible, since each player has only one turn per round. After a while of playing, Faye discovers where the cards he needs are, but at this moment, Leolishi gets a pair he desired, a blank card that allows any question, similar to the Joker in a regular deck of cards. The goddess comments that she really wanted that pair of cards and reminds Faye that she asked him to answer questions honestly. Immediately, she changes her expression and asks what Faye's true reason for wanting to approach her is, making it clear that she won't allow him to lie. Faye observes the power the goddess clearly possesses and recalls again the person from his past. Then he notices that they both were after the Joker pair and that he's enjoying the game, so he decides to be honest. Faye reveals that his task is to keep an eye on Leolishi because Miranda wants to know who she is and what her goals are. The manager panics, thinking that this will make the goddess furious and turn the city into ashes. However, Leolishi says she was already expecting a response like that and thanks Faye for his honesty and for playing with her. Leolishi says she wouldn't ask such a question to a human she doesn't know and asks Faye to call her just Leshy because he doesn't need to be formal with her since he answered her question in line with the game's objective, and the distance between them prevents them from properly enjoying themselves. Then, Leolishi floats the pairs of cards Faye acquired, being Dreams, Hometown, and Hobbies. Faye realizes that the game's goal isn't simply to get the pairs, unlike the original memory game, because it didn't make sense for him to pick the name cards if he already knew his opponent's name. After all, that wouldn't provide any new information and he would have just wasted his turn. That additional rule of always being a single turn forced them both to weigh the cards and information they wanted to acquire. Faye admits that it was an enjoyable adjustment. Then Leolishi asks what Faye would have asked if he had gotten the blank cards. After all, to discover her goals as he wanted, he just needed the pairs of dream cards. Realizing that Leolishi was willing to clear his doubt, Faye asks why the goddess stays in that world and doesn't return to Elements, and why she chose him among many other more skilled apostles. Leolishi explains that Faye is the only beginner with 3 victories, something very few achieve in a century, and that's why she wants to finish the game of the gods with him. She reveals that she came to Earth to play with humans but found out she couldn't return to her world and become a goddess again without getting the 10 victories required in the game of the gods. Faye is surprised and asks if she knows what the celebration is, the prize for those who achieve the 10 victories. The goddess confirms and explains that the human theory is almost correct. The gods will grant one wish to the apostle who completes the game. But unlike what humanity deduce, it's not just one wish, but as many as the winner wishes to make. Then she pulls him and takes him to the entrance of the Divine Gate, which he recognizes as the dive center. Lelouch then says she's been waiting a long time for a human like him. After that, they both cross the Divine Gate and end up in a higher spiritual realm, where a huge creature resides. Before Faye could process what was happening, a small creature announces the start of the game, a god's tag. God causes a small destruction in the buildings around, making several pieces of the construction fall on top of the participants, and everyone starts using their arises to protect themselves. Leshy wonders why Faye isn't using his power, and he explains that his arise is immortality. At that moment, a huge chunk of debris starts falling right towards the girl. Faye gets worried, but Leshy easily destroys the stone, reminding him that she is an ancient goddess. The girl then says she can't use 100% of her power and finds it cute that the guy was concerned about her. 10 minutes ago, when Faye and Leshy passed through the portal and arrived in Elements, the guy observes that the place looks a bit like the city, and the girl deduces it has something to do with the god of that game, although she's not sure since she doesn't know all the gods. Next, the two see the other participants, and Faye greets a girl named Asta and explains to her that he barely returned and was already dragged to the higher spiritual realm. Leshy takes the opportunity to introduce herself as well, and everyone is shocked to see the ancient goddess there. She explains that she will participate in the game, but reassures them by saying she will be on the human team. At that moment, the small creature appears, welcoming everyone and introducing itself. It says its name is Meep and lives in the territories of the Titan God, and since it was already time, no apostle could sign up for that game anymore. So with the registrations closed, totaling 18 participants, one of them starts recording so the game can be broadcast to the rest of the world. Miranda watches the broadcast, holding on to hope that Faye is capable of fulfilling humanity's mission, winning the games of the gods. Meep informs that it will give the game instructions, and a man reminds that the Titan God likes battle games. Then a girl analyzes the ancient games against that god, realizing that with that number of participants, they will have a 14% chance of winning. The man keeps hope alive as their chances increase in a fighting game with Leshy by their side. However, Meep warns that Titan is tired of battle games, so that one will be a game of tag among the gods, a game none of the participants had heard of until then. Faye asks if it's like a normal game of tag that would happen within the area of the buildings, and Meep confirms, making it clear that it's not allowed to leave the area with light. However, unlike a normal game of tag, they can lose without being tagged, and so Meep finishes explaining the rules of the game, without revealing the other way to lose and without telling them what they would have to do to win. To make matters worse, they would all have 5 minutes to flee, but Titan gets impatient waiting for the time to pass and starts the game before they even have the minutes to run. Back to the present, the participants have difficulty escaping from Titan, who pursues them at high speed. So they all scatter and try to blend in with the shadows of the buildings around, leaving 4 other players with Faye and Leshy, including Asta. One of them suggests that the group hides inside the buildings because even though it's a game of tag, it's safer to hide. Asta thinks it's a good idea and starts heading towards the entrance of a building, moving away from the group. However, Faye asks her to wait and explains that it doesn't seem like a good idea since the god knows their approximate location. At that moment, Titan appears and heads towards the girl, who doesn't even have time to try to run. Everyone thinks Asta will be disqualified from the game, but instead, she remains in Elements and her body turns red. Then the girl's wind magic starts coming out on its own and attacking her group. With this, Faye immediately realizes that the players caught by the god become his allies, one of the rules that Meep kept hidden. Asta tells everyone to run away, but with her body moving on its own, she ends up hitting 3 players who are lined up against a wall. Titan takes advantage of the moment to step on one of them. However, by doing so, the other 2 who were beside immediately become allies of the god as well, even without being touched. So Leshy and Faye run away, as they were the only ones left nearby, and that place was clearly no longer safe. Titan chases the 2 when suddenly he changes his mind and goes after another target, but Asta appears to continue the pursuit. While fleeing, Faye observes that in just a few seconds, the game went from 18 against 1 to 14 against 5, and if the others are also caught, it will be 17 on the god's team against the 2. Furthermore, the guy notices that only half of Asta's body turned red, which means she wasn't completely out of the game. So, with just a glance at Leshy, his partner understands what he was thinking. The 2 pick up the pace to hide from Asta and attack the girl with a trash can, covering her body to prevent her from releasing her wind magic. Then Leshy touches Asta, causing the girl to return to the human team. Because they discovered the second hidden rule, which allows them to recover lost players, Titan sees the 3 as main targets again and resumes chasing them. For safety, Faye asks Asta to hide somewhere, leaving only him and Leshy to escape from the god. And so the 2 start running again, and Leshy observes that they are just running, but they still don't know how to win. Faye also remembers that Meep said they could lose even without being caught, so they have to find out the winning condition as soon as possible. As the two were thinking in complete synchrony, Leshy observes that they think alike and that Faye is taking the game very seriously. The guy confirms and says that game is quite exciting. The ancient goddess is happy and says that when humans take games against gods seriously, they become more fun, which reminds Faye of the girl from his past who said games are for fun. However, despite finding the game exciting, Faye still wanted to discover the condition for winning. The two keep running until they are surrounded by the other 15 players who ended up being caught. In other words, only Faye, Leshy, and Asta remain on the humans' team, totaling 3 and 16, including the Titan. So they flee into a building, and the goddess destroys the connection it had with a neighboring building to prevent the Titan's allies from following them, gaining them a few seconds. However, the god was also on his way, and they still had to figure out how to win. Reflecting on this, Faye realizes they needed to make the players switch sides, finally unraveling all the hidden rules of that game, which was a mix of tag, hide and seek, and another game, one he doesn't need to mention because Leshy understands immediately what the guy meant. And so, knowing what they had to do to win, the two split up, with Leshy in charge of luring the other players out of the building, while Faye decides to head up to the rooftop. As they both proceed with the plan, the Titan god destroys all the buildings around, and Faye realizes he's planning to checkmate the game and hopes they can execute the plan in time. Then, as soon as he reaches the rooftop, the Titan finishes destroying the surrounding buildings and heads to the only one left, where Faye is to end the game with his own hands. And thus, the god hits Faye, making all the other players lame at having one less player on the human team. However, contrary to what everyone thinks, the guy remains on the same team thanks to his power to not die because his Arise is actually God's favorite, which allows him to escape from that tag rule of the game. But still, at the moment, the game is 16 against 3. However, Faye tells the Titan that unlike what he thinks, that is about to change because the hidden game in that tag is Reversi. So the guy explains that throughout the game, he realized that the city symbolizes a board, and they are the pieces. The god's team plays first and takes the pieces for themselves, which is when a person is tagged. Then the humans play and manage to make the players return to the human team as if the piece were flipped. Furthermore, Reversi is a game that ends when the board is full and no more moves are possible. And in that scenario, it's when all the buildings are destroyed, where the winner is whoever has more pieces on the board. Additionally, Faye explains that when a guy was tagged by the Titan and 2 others changed teams as well, even without being tagged, it was because they were thrown against the wall in a way that they were lined up, which according to the rules of Reversi, would flip them to the opposing team. Then the guy finally reveals that his goal was to distract the Titan for Leshy and Asta to take action. At that moment, the girls come out of hiding and Asta throws 7 participants against the wall, leaving them lined up as before. Then they touch 2 people, causing everyone in the rows to be reversed, changing the score to 10 humans against Man the God's team, just in time for the last building to collapse completely. And thus, the game ends with the humans as the winners, with the Titan God accepting his defeat. With the game over, everyone returns to the human world and Miranda celebrates the victory, as it had been 35 days since humanity last won against the gods, making the tag game receive the highest viewership in the world. She thanks Faye for giving them that victory and asks how it was for him to partner with the former goddess because the two were so in sync that they didn't seem like a newly formed duo. Faye says it was amazing how the two understood each other with just a glance and comments that the former goddess is truly impressive, as if that were the reason for their teamwork result. But Miranda says she doesn't think it happened because she was a former goddess, but because it was him and Leshy working together. She also mentions that the former goddess used to play alone before meeting him, making the guy remember his past when he also used to play alone. Miranda continues to say that even at that time, Leshy was very strong and had no opponents, but now that the two are working as a team, Faye can finally fulfill his dream of beating the gods game and winning whatever prize he wants. After that, Faye goes to Leshy's room, where he meets the former goddess, who was watching recordings of the tag game for the 4th time, to analyze what the two could have done differently. Leshy decides to take that time to find out what Faye wants to achieve by beating the game. After all, she wanted to become a complete goddess again, but he hadn't told her yet what he wanted as a reward. So the guy explains that he wants to find a person he used to play with when he was a child who taught him everything about games. Faye recounts that despite always losing in all games, the woman accepted all his challenges with a smile until one day she left, promising they would see each other again, and since then he has wanted to see the person again to thank her, as she was responsible for him getting to where he is. Leshy finds the wish interesting but asks Faye if he has any other clues besides the fact that she used to play. But the guy says he doesn't know her name and doesn't remember her face or voice. The only thing he remembers is that the woman had red hair just like Leshy. Faye mentions that when he met the former goddess, he wondered if the two had any relation, but Leshy recalls she was trapped in ice for 3,000 years. However, despite not knowing the girl, she hopes Faye can fulfill his wish to find her. So Faye thinks that finding someone who is so similar to the person he's looking for might have been fate, and now the two are partners and will fight to beat the gods' game. Later, Leshy informs Miranda that she and Faye have decided to form a team. However, the manager explains that just the two of them don't meet the minimum number of participants required for the games. Faye explains that they went there exactly because she knows better how many people the two of them will need on the team. Then Miranda complains to them because she was already in her pajamas and thought she would finally be able to rest after a long day of work. Then she starts complaining to the two of them for bothering her, and they immediately start apologizing. Afterwards, the manager explains that the Arcane Court recommends that a group have 10 or more people because statistics from the last 30 years show that groups with fewer than 9 people have a winning rate of less than 4%, while those with 10 or more have a 9% win rate, and those with over 20 people have an 11% win rate. In other words, the more members in the group, the better. However, Leshy doesn't like the idea because she thinks it's better to have a team with just the two of them than to have other participants who don't like playing. Because of this, Miranda advises them to form an alliance with teams that have few people and says she trusts Faye to recruit good players. The guy questions this, saying that getting that done is Faye's job, but the manager explains that it's necessary for the two of them to find people who match with them, and after saying this, she finally goes to rest. The next day, Faye meets Leshy at a place he explains is the consultation section. He tells her that he had already made a virtual member call because all team applications are digital, and if someone looking for players shows up, he'll call him. However, in some cases, like not being able to reach a partner, it's better to have an in-person consultation, so some players looking for a team may appear in the consultation section. For this reason, Faye decides to stay there waiting to see if anyone showed up while contacting some teams to see if they accept the two of them. He starts by calling Ashlan, a captain of a team called Blaze. As soon as he answers, the guy shows great excitement for Faye to join his team. After all, he's a highly skilled novice player who still doesn't have a team. However, as soon as Faye mentions that he's also with the former goddess, Ashlan hangs up on him. Faye doesn't understand and calls back. Then the captain answers and asks if it can only be him joining the team because the goddess is involved in an incident. Realizing that Faye doesn't know anything, Ashlan explains that Leshy doesn't accept anyone insulting the game of the gods, and after a defeat, a certain team ended up frustrated with the games. After getting drunk, they started saying that the games were just nonsense, and the goddess ended up overhearing the group complaining. Then the 12 apostles ended up in the hospital, and the event became known as the Bloody Incident with the goddess. At that moment, Faye questions Leshy's attitude, who doesn't know what to say, and explains that she didn't control her strength well that day. Then Ashlan, not knowing that Leshy was near the call, explains to Faye that he regrets it, but he won't be able to accept the goddess on his team, even though she looks like a beautiful girl, albeit with a little bust. The captain's comment about Leshy's body makes her completely dissatisfied and a little insecure, so Faye quickly hangs up the call with his friend and reassures the girl. Later, he analyzes the options and decides to call a team called Black Rose because they have an excellent game analyst. He tells Leshy that it's common for teams to have someone responsible for researching and analyzing game content, as well as having coaches who train them. And so Faye calls Captain Yuki from the team he's interested in. The girl confirms that her group needs new members, but warns that many players have already shown interest in joining the team and failed because they are very demanding. But as it's Faye, she says she can get him a spot right away. Faye thanks her and asks the captain if she wouldn't accept another person on the team with him. Yuki becomes interested in hearing Faye's recommendation, but when she finds out it's the former goddess, the girl panics and hangs up the call. Then Faye asks what else Leshy has been up to. She tries to say she hasn't done anything, but starts talking in a strange way, which makes Faye suspicious that the goddess is lying. Under pressure, Leshy ends up confessing that for the past 6 months she's been idle and has been practicing battle games with humans in the underground Colosseum, and her first opponent was Yuki. However, Leshy explains that at the time she still couldn't control her power well and ended up leaving the girl quite traumatized. Faye scolds Leshy and realizes that the two of them won't be able to join existing teams. The goddess feels guilty about it and says she just wanted to learn more about humans. Faye understands her, knowing that the girl has even read several books about human knowledge to better understand them. Then he says that since the two of them can't join any existing teams, they can recruit skilled players to create their own team, like someone with teleportation powers. Just then, a girl with that ability appears, which immediately interests the duo. After all, that power is very useful and functional. They follow the girl to the consultation section counter, where they hear her say she came there to retire. Then Leshy quickly burns the girl's retirement paper, leaving her puzzled. Then the girl recognizes the dragon goddess and Faye, the skilled beginner, who explains that the two of them are looking for companions to play. She completely denies the idea of joining their team, but ends up agreeing to talk about it when Faye suggests they grab something to eat. And so she says her name is Pearl Diamond, she's 16 years old and has 1 win and 1 loss in the Games of the Gods. Faye finds it strange that the girl has a very powerful ability and still wants to retire because of just 1 defeat. After all, for an apostle, the game is like a job, just like for sports professionals who work hard every day to improve themselves and gain fans and autograph requests for the results. While Faye ponders the matter and checks the girl's data, Leshy watches Pearl summoning a new tub of ice cream one after another, and before the guy realizes it, she's already eaten 35 servings. Later, Faye reports that she checked the system for data on her defeat, and the girl explains that this is the reason for her retirement. Her power allows her not only to teleport humans and objects, but also to swap things around as she did with the sweets. Pearl recounts that in the match she lost, the rule was to protect the leader, but when the god approached, she became so terrified at the thought of being crushed that she accidentally activated her power and swapped places with the team captain, leading to the defeat of all participants. Because of this, she wishes to retire. Faye observes that Pearl may have been responsible for a defeat, but she surely must have saved many people with her power. However, this doesn't cheer up the girl, who explains that she couldn't meet expectations since swapping places isn't as good an ability as it seems. It requires touching the object for 3 minutes beforehand to work. Pearl admits she even messes up measuring time, and due to losing control of her power and being clumsy and scared, some colleagues had to retire after losing 3 games. Additionally, she mentions that she only achieved 1 victory because of her team. Then Leshy remarks that Pearl is belittling the gods by thinking that a team with deadweight could win a match. The goddess makes it clear that they won't blame her even if they lose due to a mistake, as it's something normal to happen. Despite the goddess and Faye's proposal, Pearl remains intent on retiring and leaves through a portal, leaving the two alone. This makes the guy remember once again the person who used to play with him in his childhood, who said that games are meant to be fun. When Leshy asks if they're going after another person, Faye says they'll research which dormitory Pearl is in because he finds it a waste for things to end like this. The goddess asks if Faye thinks this because of the girl's power, and he explains that he doesn't actually want Pearl to retire because that way she'll be afraid of games for the rest of her life, which would be a real waste. And so the two head to Pearl's room. They ring the bell, but no one answers, and Leshy discovers that the door is open. Faye fears that Pearl has already left and enters desperately searching for her, but in doing so he catches the girl changing clothes. After Pearl dresses, she explains that she usually uses portals to enter her room and thus forgot to lock the door, feeling embarrassed that the guy saw her changing. Next, the girl explains that she became a player at the same time as Faye and always admired him for being so good right off the bat, which is why she doesn't think she's the ideal person to join his team because she would only be a burden to everyone. Faye disagrees when he notices several bags in Pearl's room. The girl explains that she prepared snacks as a way to apologize to her former colleagues for making them lose the game, but none of them accepted the apology and even said she wasn't worthy to see the team captain. Leshy gets irritated with the situation and says that none of the team members, not even she, understand that whether winning or losing, what matters is having fun and playing again, as well as understanding that it's natural for a god to win in a game of gods. And for this reason, it's not fair to put all the responsibility for the defeat on one person. Pearl is happy to see how Leshy thinks, but insists that there's nothing she can do about the situation. So Faye tells the girl that she can clear her name. He suggests that the 3 of them play a game with Pearl's old team to help them win and show her potential, because even though it's frustrating to end a game with a loss, it was just 1 loss and she still has the right to challenge the gods in other matches. Pearl is unsure of what to choose, and Faye tells her that they'll try at least once and he won't insist afterward. So the girl is moved by the way she was recruited by the 2 and agrees to participate in a game of the gods with them. However, when the time for the match arrives, Pearl becomes completely nervous from the way her former teammates are staring at her. Before they enter the higher spiritual realm, Miranda appears and informs Faye that she had to break rules to tell him the day Pearl's old team called Inferno would play, and for this reason, it's important that they win. Additionally, they attract a lot of viewership. Then Miranda reminds Pearl that the whole world will be watching the match and she must do her best. This makes the girl even more nervous, but Leshy reminds her that the goal of the 3 of them is to have fun. The players begin to pass through the portal to go to the elements, and the goddess starts to take Pearl. Still, the girl remains desperate and says she's not ready. Then Faye reminds her that they make up for mistakes with victory. And so, after Pearl receives all the support, the 3 pass through the portal and end up in the sky. Suddenly, something enormous appears below the clouds, and Faye recognizes that it's the game against the god of despair, Ouroboros, responsible for the defeat of several apostles who lost the game without being able to do anything. However, instead of being worried, the guy gets excited about the idea of challenging the god at his own game. Despite the excitement about the new match, the three still need to find some solution to withstand the fall. Faye thinks that teleportation would be a good way out. Pearl explains that her power has a limit of 100 feet, which wouldn't help much at that height. So Leshy uses her ability to make them fall at a slower and safer speed. However, as they approach Ouroboros' body, the girl encounters obstacles. But despite not having a very good landing, everyone falls safely. They meet with Pearl's and Faye's former group, and Faye asks them to exchange some information. A man introduces himself as the captain of the Inferno team, Orvin Miskets, and greets Pearl, who immediately apologizes to him for what happened in the last game. Orvin reveals that 4 apostles have already been eliminated. 3 of them didn't survive the fall and returned to the real world, while a 4th was caught by flying whales, which the arcane court calls leviathans, creatures that wait for humans to fall from Ouroboros back to devour them. The situation of that game worries some participants because if they lose the match, they would have to retire, but the captain motivates his team, reminding everyone that the game is being broadcasted to the world. At that moment, Faye notices the sadness of that sad game at corner, thinking it's useless to explain the god's challenge since no one has ever managed to win. Faye grabs the creature, which reveals that Ouroboros is playing Forbidden Word, where the objective is for them to make the god say a certain word, which is the condition to win. However, figuring out what the word is part of the challenge, which excites Faye. The group discovers that Ouroboros' body is very large, measuring 10,000 meters, being by far the largest god. Suddenly, they all fall into a trap, and the Meep explains that they will only be able to leave that place when they discover what the forbidden word is. Leshy says that surely the word has something to do with the game, and everyone starts making attempts when the Meep remembers to warn that they have already said the forbidden word at some point in that match, prompting all players to try to remember everything they have said. But even with several guesses, Faye is the one who guesses the word ouch, which Leshy and Pearl said when they fell, something that has been said twice. And so the group is freed from the trap and moves to another part of the god's body. On the way, Faye observes that Ouroboros does not speak the language of humans, and for this reason, the condition for victory should not be literally to make him say the forbidden word, but to make him express some kind of pain. So the guy steps harder on Ouroboros' body, but doesn't even tickle. Then Captain Orvin and the rest of the Inferno team use their powers, attempting to cause some damage. But as it also doesn't work, Leshy decides to use all the goddess strength she has, and the impact of the attack creates a gust of wind, causing some participants to fly away and be eliminated by the Leviathans. Seeing what her action caused, Leshy immediately apologizes to the group, and Captain Orvin accepts the dragon goddess apology but notes that there was no sign that the damage caused any pain to Ouroboros. Faye notes that they are in a game of wisdom, and therefore they will only be able to win when they find a way to make the god utter the forbidden word. At that moment, the Meep, who is clearly very forgetful, remembers a secret rule that he forgot to tell the players and explains that if they perform a specific action, something will happen, and when that happens, it is possible to release the second secret rule for just a moment. Then Pearl realizes that the Leviathans, Ouroboros' subordinates, are following the group, which makes the girl afraid. She runs to Faye for safety, unless she grabs her to remind the girl that they went there for her to show her potential to the Inferno team, which won't happen if she just keeps crying. Pearl realizes that her friend is right and promises to make an effort, so the two girls set out to search, and after a while searching, they find Ouroboros' tail, which has a scale of a different color from the others, making the place stand out. Pearl gets excited about the idea of having found the god's weak point and ends up not paying attention to Faye, who says he has a bad feeling about it, making the guy remember that manager Miranda had talked about having some players who assume things on their own. However, he realizes that it's valid to conduct a test and tells Pearl to attack, but as a precaution, to retreat immediately after hitting the weak point. The girl agrees and draws Captain Orvin's attention so he can pay attention to her. Then Pearl punches Ouroboros' tail and the place lights up. Faye deduces that the blow made the god angry. So as Pearl didn't retreat as requested, Leshy goes to her, making both of them duck just in time to prevent being hit by several attacks that the tail launches in different spots. With that, several players are hit and eliminated, as well as some Leviathans that were nearby. Orvin realizes that it was a trap and says that ill-thought-out actions bring danger to the group. Pearl apologizes to everyone and says she was just trying to be helpful, but Faye reassures her, saying that if she hadn't tried, he would have because it was important to check the theory. After all, they were in a game where the only option was to test the possibilities to reach the victory condition. Faye also makes it clear that even if he had been eliminated in that attempt, he wouldn't blame her for it because the most important thing of all is not to pressure a colleague who makes a mistake. Then Faye says that contrary to what Captain Orven thought, he doesn't think the tail activated a trap because a god like Ouroboros wouldn't be happy to catch just a few players, and for that reason, that must be some way for them to achieve victory, probably the first secret rule that the meat mentioned. Orven completely disagrees with Faye. After all, several were eliminated with that action. However, the guy says that in fact there were only 4 participants, and if Ouroboros really wanted to, he could have eliminated many more. Leshy acknowledges that it is indeed very suspicious that hundreds of lights missed the target. So Orven asks what Faye intends to do, and he replies that the next step is to discover the second secret rule of the game, and although he has no idea what it is, the match has no time limit so they can focus on just achieving the goal. Then Faye sits down to analyze the situation calmly, reflecting on what the reason for the second secret rule of the game being something temporary might be, as well as all the possibilities they haven't tested yet. However, instead of the other players doing the same as him, Team Inferno begins to grow impatient and think about giving up since the Arcane Court allows withdrawal without reason in matches against the god Ouroboros. Captain Orven then remembers that giving up would force some teammates to retire because they already had 2 other defeats. This makes everyone remember that this way out would be an option if it weren't for Pearl's mistake in the game they played together 6 months ago. And they start yelling at the girl, who feels bad about the situation and guilty. Leshy immediately gets angry at seeing the group humiliating Pearl and says that if they want to leave so badly, she can return them to the real world herself. However, she then calms down and explains that she didn't get angry in that way because of the discord they have with Pearl, but because everyone is upset, even though they are in such an exciting and fun game. The group finds it strange that Leshy is enjoying that situation and thinks it's because she's a goddess, but the girl observes that Faye is a human, clearly enjoying every moment of the game. The guy kept reflecting on what happened when Pearl activated the first secret rule when he decides to activate it again. He warns that this will probably result in more casualties than last time, but tells the other players that even if they lose, they should keep watching the match via transmission because he promises to win. Next, Faye asks Leshy to hit Ouroboros' tail as hard as she can. The former goddess obeys and launches a mega attack, causing all the thorns in the region to light up, unlike last time when it was only 1. As a result, a jet of powerful lights is released, hitting everything around, eliminating all the players except Faye, Pearl, and Leshy, who protect the 2 from the counterattack. The blow irritates the nearby Leviathans, causing them to start trying to attack Ouroboros. Pearl asks why the god's subordinates would be doing that, and Faye says that no one ever said what they were in the game, and with that reaction, it is possible to understand that they are neutral monsters. Next, the guy grabs Pearl and takes them both onto the Leviathans, while he realizes that Ouroboros has finally started to move. Leshy also mounts one of the flying whales, and thus they discover that the second secret rule is that by attacking the god's tail and him counterattacking, it is possible to use the Leviathans for some period. At that moment, the Meep appears all happy that someone has finally reached the last part of the game, with only them left to make Ouroboros feel pain and say the forbidden word. Leshy notes that first they need to discover the god's true weak point, and Faye deduces that it's on the underside of his body. After all, they hadn't found Ouroboros' eyes anywhere above, and the weak point can only be in a location that can be found only when mastering the Leviathans. And so finally, the trio finds Ouroboros' eyes, being his true weak point. However, as they get closer, they discover a defense system. When approaching one of the eyes, the other one launches attacks, making it necessary to think of a method to approach safely. Suddenly, Faye and Pearl realize that the eyes of the Leviathan they are riding started blinking, deducing it to be a way to indicate that their time controlling the creature was ending. Then Leshy springs into action while Faye whispers something in Pearl's ear and asks her to do what he instructed at the right moment. Next, the Leviathan rises high and Faye jumps to another creature, trusting Pearl to succeed in his plan. He draws Ouroboros' attention so that Leshy can approach without being caught. The idea works and the goddess strikes one of Ouroboros' eyes, causing it to crack. However, the other eye launches an attack at the girl, making her fall. But that was also part of the plan. Next, Faye approaches to finish her attack. Captain Orven and his team watch the match's transmission and think the guy won't be able to deliver the blow in time before the other eye launches its attack. However, moments before that happens, Faye gives the order to Pearl, who uses her teleportation to take him to where she and Leshy were. As a result, the attack launched by one eye goes straight to the other, which was already cracked because of the former goddess of blow, causing it to shatter completely, because the condition for victory is that Ouroboros would defeat himself. And so the god screams in pain, and everyone watching the transmission celebrates, including Orvan's team, who realize that although they were eliminated, the victory goes to the entire group, making the captain realize that Pearl redeemed herself with all of them. When the game ends, Ouroboros appears, acknowledging his defeat in the match. She also hands Faye a special reward for defeating Ouroboros for the first time, a fragment of his eye being a god's crown, which allows whoever has it to summon him. Ouroboros also promises to make her game 100 times more difficult and challenges the trio to participate in it. A few days later, a girl named Nell Reckless dreams once again about a game she participated in and wakes up startled. Then she realizes she left the TV on broadcasting the match that Faye won against Ouroboros, and after observing his playing style, Nell decides to dedicate her life to Faye. Meanwhile, Leshy complains to Miranda upon discovering that they won't be able to participate in their branch's games, even though they managed to recruit Pearl to join the team. The manager explains that they can't participate due to the huge waiting list of players, something that happened precisely because of Faye and Lesha, as Ouroboros' defeat is unprecedented in history and stimulated many apostles to participate. A branch team made a request at the same time as the three of them. However, Leshy refuses to give up on participating and decides to forcefully steal the Divine Gate. Faye then comments to Miranda that they need to do something because the former goddess may cause trouble if deprived of games. Miranda agrees and suggests that the group participate in the World Games Championship. And so the team takes a train trip to the city of the Malra Sacred Source to participate in the World Championship. Along the way, Pearl notes that they can't even thank the people who retired and used their arises to protect the city and develop the outside world. They also remember that Miranda explained that the World Games Championship is a competition to which athletes from all over the world are invited. She also mentioned that Ouroboros' defeat led to the three of them receiving many requests from different cities to participate in the championship, as apostles who win difficult matches against gods are treated as heroes. After the manager explains everything to the team, Pearl uses a dart game to decide which of the cities that invited them they should go to. The girl is excited that they can choose and feels honored to be in charge of deciding this, and her dart ends up hitting the city of the Malra Sacred Source, thus determining the group's destination. In the present, after a long journey, the trio arrives at the location, and Leshy is excited to explore the game stores and discover which games are famous there, but Faye reminds them that they should first visit the Malra branch. At that moment, Pearl notices a girl, Nell, with a welcome sign for Faye's team, which makes the three of them find it a bit suspicious. After all, she was a complete stranger. Nell had been looking for them everywhere when she notices Faye and the girls looking at her. The trio is startled by Nell's excitement and decides to flee, but she uses her arise, which gives her absurd speed and easily catches up with the group. Faye is impressed by the girl's superhuman physical strength and asks if she is an apostle. Nell then introduces herself and explains that she's a former player from the city of Malra who watched his match against Ouroboros and decided to be his subordinate. The conversation attracts the curiosity of the people around, and Faye doesn't know how to respond or what the girl meant by being his subordinate. Nell explains that she would do anything for him, like cooking or washing his clothes, but this embarrasses Faye even more. He asks for support from Leshy and Pearl to get rid of the situation, but the two judge him, thinking that Faye has some interest in the unknown girl. So Nell begs Faye again to allow her to be his subordinate, and he takes advantage of the girl not looking to run away from there. Nell sees the trio fleeing and runs to catch up with them, forgetting to check the street before crossing. When she realizes she sees a moving car right in her direction, and to avoid being hit, she uses her power to kick the car away. Her plan works, but only later Nell realizes that her action put the driver's life in danger. Worried that she caused an accident, she ends up falling behind, and Faye and his team manage to reach the Malra branch without being followed. As soon as they arrive, he notices the statue of the water spirit, Undine, when the people around recognize him as the apostle who defeated Ouroboros. Then, a tall man appears behind Pearl, and she is startled by his presence. She runs to ask for help from the local guard, thinking the man was someone dangerous, but then discovers that he is the manager of the Malra branch of the Arcane Court named Balegar Lanz. The manager takes the team up the stairs of the building to his office on the 8th floor, refusing to take the elevator due to it being a healthier option, which leaves Pearl a bit sad about having to climb so many flights of stairs. On the way, Balegar explains that the main event of the World Games Championship will be in 3 days during the Gods' Play. For the event, they rented the city's sports stadium and sold 10,000 tickets. Balegar also says that the next day there will be an intermunicipal match, and he would like the three of them to participate because several players want to compete with the former goddess and with Faye, known as the best rookie in recent years. Faye agrees to participate, and Pearl is delighted by the popularity of their group, thinking that she must also be becoming famous for participating in the game where Ouroboros was defeated. But as the manager remains silent, the girl worries that her popularity may not be as good as Faye and Leshy's. Later, Belegar takes the trio to a room to show several photos of the previous year's World Games Championship, including those of the people who came to the city as guests at the time. Leshy notices that in one of the photos, the team wears black uniforms, and Faye remembers that that color belongs to the best team of the branch. The manager takes the opportunity to explain that the golden embroidery on the uniform indicates that it belongs to the main branch of the Arcane Court. At that moment, an apostle in a black uniform named Dax Gear appears and recognizes the team as visitors from the ruined branch due to the uniform's blue embroidery. Belegar observes that the player always seeks to meet the visitors before the games and begins to introduce Dax to the group, but the guy interrupts the manager to introduce himself. Dax also treats Faye's group like any other, which makes Belegar reprimand him. After all, that's the team the former goddess belongs to. However, the guy doesn't care about it and makes it clear that he won't give them any special treatment because he's only interested in knowing if the three of them are good players or not. Leshy is happy to meet an apostle who only has eyes for games, and Pearl notices that Dax wears a black uniform. The manager then explains that he is a newcomer who joined the branch a year ago and assembled his team much faster than anyone else in the world, besides winning against a god in his first match. He also mentions that so far, Dax has won 3 games and lost 2, becoming the current representative of the Malware branch. Impressed, Pearl comments that the guy is a prodigy just like Faye. Dax agrees, stating that the 2 players were destined to meet. He also praises Faye's victory against the gods Titan and Ouroboros and invites him to join his team, named Tempest Cruiser. Dax explains that he is gathering talented players from around the world because he intends to form the strongest team in history and completely dominate the game of the gods, with Faye being the missing piece. However, Faye thanks him for the invitation and compliments, but clarifies that he came to the city only to participate in the World Games Championship. Dax accepts his refusal and leaves, although it seems he is not giving up on getting what he wants. Later, Faye talks to his team and explains that he has been thinking about what kind of game they will participate in, and in his research, he accidentally came across information about Nell. He reveals that she retired a month ago with 3 wins and 3 losses, and although not a very special number from what he saw, she was a good player because she followed the captain's orders well and cared about supporting her teammates. However, in a game called God's Statue, where 3 players were needed to press a button, the group used the 4th participant as bait to attract the attention of the god. But when that participant was disqualified, they all panicked upon seeing that the god went into full surveillance, and the captain ended up surrendering without even trying to find another solution. With most giving up, Nell lost the game, even though she begged her team not to give up victories so easily, as they could very well have tried to win with just 3 players, even if they didn't have bait to distract the god. With this game, Nell acquired 3 losses and was forced to retire. Faye comments that he was curious about the match, and Pearl observes that Nell was the opposite of her because she had a defeat due to her own mistake, and was choosing to retire of her own free will, unlike Nell, who acquired a defeat because of her team and was forced into retirement even though she probably wanted to continue participating in the games of the gods. Faye agrees that Pearl may be right and regrets running away from Nell before she could explain her situation better. At that moment, the doorbell rings and Pearl goes to answer, thinking it's the manager, Belegar. However, upon opening the door, she discovers Nell pretending to be a room service employee. Nell tries to maintain her disguise, but everyone recognizes her by her voice and hair color. Then Nell runs away before Faye could explain that he wants to talk to her. After stopping running, Nell wonders why she fled like that when Dax appears and says that doing something so pathetic doesn't suit her. He continues, saying that they both entered the branch as colleagues 2 years ago, but unlike her, he survived. Dax then asks what sets them apart, and Nell braces herself to hear something offensive, but he replies that the difference between them was just the team, because despite her ability, she was unlucky with her allies. Next, Dax asks Nell to join his team to help with her skills as an analyst, but she declines the invitation, stating that she has already decided to only be part of Faye's team and doesn't want to be part of any other group. However, she suggests that they make a bet involving the victory of Faye's team in the next day's game, called a friendly match, confidently betting that Faye will win. And so the next day, the trio prepares to play, excited to participate in a championship at a venue as grand as that sports stadium. Before they go, Nell shows up to warn them that, as they already know, their opponents will be Dax's team, and even for someone like Faye, it won't be an easy match because Dax's natural sense for games is undeniable. But even so, she says she'll be cheering for the 3 in the audience, and they must win no matter what. The trio is surprised to learn that Nell came there just to tell them that she'll be rooting for them, but are happy nonetheless. Then the team heads to the stadium, where a huge crowd awaits. Dax greets them and makes it clear that he came there to be the winner and is not willing to be humiliated, and Faye observes that his opponent is intense, making it clear that this is a compliment. Dax explains that his way of acting depends on his opponent, and to make it a fair match, a random game will be selected from the thousands installed at the venue. Then Dax asks the operator to start the selected game, and an augmented reality video appears, causing various data to appear throughout the stadium, much to Faye's surprise. Hey folks, if you're digging this anime and want to see more, drop a like down below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to hit 90,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you in the next one.